So, having said that, I am smiling and laughing, and Jeanette and some of you can, because 2 weeks ago, or I guess it was 2 weeks, a week or so ago, I gave the Bible study in Santa Rosa on worship. And I told them at that particular time this was not complete. It was kind of like a little moment that I wanted to bring to Joanne, who had been missing the opportunity of worship. And so I told them that I would probably rehearse that, not for others, for those that didn't make that Bible study, for the churches that I pastor. So I am smiling in this regard, because one of the things that this sermon touches on are the things that Dr. Williams was talking about there. So I want to talk about our call to worship, and that's what it's titled. I want to look at the fact that this call to worship is one that is given to us by Jesus. And it is Jesus' encounter with the woman at the well that he makes this call to worship to them. So in John chapter 4, and actually we can begin in verse 20 all the way through 24, but we're going to focus on verses 23 and 24 today. Here's what Jesus said. This woman had talked to him. There obviously were the differences. One, that she was a woman. Two, that she was a Samaritan, not a Jew. And Jews and Samaritans did not have anything to do with one another. But Jesus begins this conversation with this woman. But in verse 20, she makes a statement about worship. So because she had perceived by what he had said previously that he was a prophet, and so this immediately brought up the thing about worship and the differences that they have. And she then decides or defends her side and says, verse 20, "Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews," I love it, you people, kind of thing, "you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." So now we have a little contrast here, that this is where you have to do this, but we worship on this mountain. And Jesus declared, verse 21, "Believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem." Now, she had been talking about her father Abraham and Jacob and all of that. Jesus' focus again is not on Abraham, but it is rather on the Father. It is on worship, and that the fact that it wasn't just going to be in Jerusalem or on this mountain. "You Samaritans," he's giving it right back to her, "you Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know." Now that seems like a little bit of a strange saying, but that is the truth of the matter there. "For salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when true worshipers," and again, this describing worshipers as true means there must be false worshipers or those that are less than true. "True worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth." It is in this context I want to talk about worship. And the fact that Jesus calls us to worship, he calls us to worship both in spirit and in truth, and that these two factors lead us into a relationship with our Heavenly Father. Worship is our way of life. So when we talk about these annual events and these moments in time that we look for, it is more than that. It is a way of life for us. We are called to worship. And knowing the truth also, this is the other part about worship, is that the truth allows us to come into a worship that is beyond our own capacities. It is the truth that gives us the freedom to worship and to worship God. And there would need to be a freedom to worship God if indeed you could not worship either on that mountain in Samaria or in the place that had been established for them in Jerusalem. Now, places have their impact. I remember driving over the hill in Israel and then looking down on Jerusalem and seeing, the Temple Mount and all of those things, and I'm thinking, I'm at the place, the headquarters where Jesus was, and you visit these places that you know that he was. You visit the Jordan River, supposedly where he was baptized. People have all kinds of places where things are happening, has happened, and all of that. But the place itself does change. For example, when we would go historically to the auditorium in Pasadena, a place that was built, it was dedicated to God, it was dedicated to worship God, all of those things, I would feel special in that moment. It's like a special time, it's a very special place, and I dressed up special. I got on my suit and tie and all of that, and I felt special in that particular moment in terms of worship. There, in all the worship and all the services that I have gone to, and Carol probably will remember this, and probably many others, my wife as well, oftentimes we would go to, let's say, a feast day, and one of the questions that would be asked is, why are you finishing my sentence for me? Why are you here? Now, I'm going to make an observation that is subtle. We were not there to worship. We didn't come there primarily to worship. We came there to learn. And we came there to gather facts and to add those facts to knowledge and all of these things. But in terms of worship, I think it may have fallen a little short. I'm just suggesting that it may have fallen a little short. As I was reading yesterday and the like, I'm reminded of with Jesus. After in John there where the boy gave him the fishes and the loaves and he blessed them and all of these things, Jesus makes an interesting statement when they came and they find him. And he makes a statement to the people, you have not come here because of the miracles. You have come here because of the loaves and the fishes, and that you were fed. The subtlety in all of that is this. We can come to church for the physical and miss the spiritual. The miracles that Jesus performed for those individuals, if their focus had been on that, it would have brought them to worship. For example, of someone being brought to worship is Doubting Thomas. Doubting Thomas, at the moment he stuck his hand into Jesus' hand and side, had a moment of worship. And it fell down, he worshiped Jesus. There's a difference in just having facts and knowledge in terms of worship as opposed to you have a relationship with Jesus, who he is, what he has done, and what he is doing. So worship in itself means reverence. It means obedience, that is a bodily movement expressing deep respect. It's an act of paying divine honor to a deity. It's a religious reverence and an homage. Now, when we think about worship, and it becomes confined in one sense, but very expansive in the other sense. And I say that because of the sayings, the things that Jesus says in Matthew chapter 4. I want to read this because this is helping us understand both the importance of worship and who not to worship here. Where he says in Matthew chapter 4, verse 10, This is the temptation of Jesus, and this is what Jesus said to him. And, well, this is what Satan had asked him in verse 9. All of this I will give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me.
The world today is a challenging environment for Christian believers and followers of Jesus Christ. Looking for answers? Grace Communion International local churches in Fairfield, Santa Rosa, and Modesto offers a comforting environment for Christians in search of spiritual growth and development. Contact our local ministry. Attend our local GCI churches at the times listed on your screen.